region. If you look at the roles above PL1, you get that region. This is what you get left. If you take one from the other, if you do a set difference, this is what you get left with. If you look at the downset of PL1, the things that sort of PL1 can see underneath it, you get that. The problem is that this doesn't contain all the things above EMP that aren't taken out by PL1 upset. So the punchline is that this role is not in the administrative scope of PL1. And the basic problem is that although it goes up there and through PL1, it also goes up through here. And PL1 doesn't really have anything to say about that side of the hierarchy. So just quickly, if we look at PE1, that's the upset of PE1, that's the upset of PL1, that's the set difference. It's nicely contained in the downset of PL1. Okay, therefore, it's in the administrative scope of PL1. And finally, if you actually do all the faffing around in the calculations, that's what you end up with for the administrative scope of PL1. So this is the set of roles that I claim is a sensible set of roles for PL1 to administer. I don't believe this. It should be administering this one because changes made to this will have impacts over here. And PL1 shouldn't really be having anything to say about those aspects of the role hierarchy. Now, one of the nice things about administrative scope, and I'll come back to this when I talk about its comparison with RBAC 97, is that it's dynamic. If you make changes to the hierarchy, administrative scope will it'll adapt, it'll compensate. So if you were to add a new role into this hierarchy, the administrative scope of PL1 naturally changes. Now QE1 has an alternative upset. It also goes through X as well as through PL1. And PL1 can't cope with that. So QE1 and E1 both drop out of the administrative scope of PL1. But if you add Y, just dangling off the bottom of PE1, that's fine. Everything going up from Y somehow is controlled by PL1. So Y would be okay, would stay in the administrative scope of PL1. So how can we use this? So we've got this idea which somehow identifies nice blocks in the hierarchy. How do we put it to use? So you get this family of administrative models built around this concept, and they were explicitly designed to interoperate with RBAC 96, which when I started this work was the sort of de facto standard for role-based access control. And initially, I focused on role hierarchy administration. This was really based on the observation that RBAC 97, the main competitor, if you like, or the inspiration, the motivation for this work, started with the simple bits. It started with user role assignment, permission role assignment, and then when it tried to deal with role hierarchy administration, it ran into slight problems of interoperability with these existing models. So I thought I'd do the difficult bit first, and then plug in the easy bits. So, how does this work? Well, as I said earlier, you've got 4 basic operations you might want to perform related to the set of roles and the role hierarchy. So these are the various operations. And I don't think I really need to say anything more about them. The only one perhaps that's worth saying something about is add role, where I insert a role into the hierarchy and I specify as parameters of this operation the children of this role and the parents of this role. This is slightly non-standard. RBAC 97 says you can have a single parent and a single child. You must have a single parent and a single child. I say I don't care. I can have an empty set for one of these sets. So, for example, I'm quite happy to create this role Y. And indeed, I think you should be able to create roles like Y. You shouldn't have to specify a child role for Y. But apart from that, these are pretty much as you'd expect. A is the sort of common parameter in these operations. That's the administrative role who's performing the operation. So what are the conditions for these operations to succeed? Well, they're all based on administrative scope, unsurprisingly. So add edge is fine if both the child and the parent of the two roles are in the administrative scope. Delete edge, the same. Add role is okay, but there's a slight restriction. The set of children has to be a subset of the strict administrative scope. If you actually think about administrative scope, you will find that the administrative scope of A always contains A itself. So the strict administrative scope doesn't include A, it excludes A. So I don't want to include A in the children. But otherwise, and equally if I delete a role, I don't want it deleting itself. So let's suppose we want to add this edge. PL1 can't do this because the parent role is not in the administrative scope. DIR can do this. The administrative scope of DIR conveniently is the whole hierarchy. So that would be permissible. And again, the intuition is PL1 shouldn't be tampering with this role over here. It's not part of his administrative scope, basically. It's not part of his area of responsibility. I just note in passing, this edge can't be added in ARBAC 97 by any role. I'll come back to that in a minute. This role, well again, PL1 can't add this role. It creeps outside of its administrative scope. DIR specifically is not in the administrative scope. DIR can add this role, as you might expect. Cannot be added in ARBAC 97 again. I'll come back to that. If we look at this role, this is fine. PL1 can add this. This is just like that picture where I added Y earlier. This is fine. Can't be added in ARBAC 97. So that's all very well. That was the basic model, which I called RHA1. There were a couple of intermediate models which basically, the observation with RHA1 is that what you end up with is relatively junior roles. Like this role here, for example, actually has a non-empty administrative scope. Specifically, this is the administrative scope of this role. And you probably don't really want such junior roles having any administrative capabilities. So there are a number of ways of getting around this. One of them is to define administrative permissions, and you can only do it. You can only do an administrative operation if you've got the right permission and it's in administrative scope. That's one way of doing it. So there was a couple of little tweaks, but RHA4 is a sort of departure from those, and this model rests on the idea of this admin-authority relation. And this is an alternative way of limiting the administrative roles in your system. And it's used to define administrative roles. Now, of course, if you introduce this new relation, admin-authority, you have to ask yourself the question, is this a dynamic or a static component of my model? It's only fair, because I've criticised other models for not asking this question, I ought to ask it and I ought to answer it. So within RHA4 you can change the admin-authority relation as well. So just this is really just the extended hierarchy is just a convenient way of thinking about the administrative admin-authority relation. It's a binary relation on a set of roles, so I don't actually make any distinction here between administrative roles and roles. So it can be thought of as just an edge. So I sort of add some extra edges into the role hierarchy based on this admin-authority relation. But it's important to realise that administrative capability does not imply permission. Okay, there is a distinction here, which is often missed in access control models. Just because you have the authority to change things doesn't mean you have the permission